Most software podcasts are built for developers. This one isn't. Into the Gnar is for the CEO, COO, or operator running a real business, someone who knows that software matters and keeps getting burned or confused or left behind when it comes time to build it. I'm Mike Stone. I'm one of the co-founders of the Gnar Company, a custom software development agency based in Boston. With me is my co-founder and co-host, Nick Maloney. We've spent the last 10 plus years building software for companies of all sizes, from scrappy startups to $100 million operators and beyond. And we've seen the same mistakes made over and over. Not because the people are making them are bad at their jobs, but because nobody ever told them what they needed to know before they started. And that's what this show is. Into the Gnar, where the cutting edge of software gets built. We're going to talk about real builds, real decisions, real consequences, the moments where things went sideways and how they got back on track. We're going to bring in the operators who lived through it, not the consultants who wrote about it afterwards. And we're going to do it in plain language, because the gap between how software gets talked about and how it actually gets built is where most of the damage happens. This is Into the Gnar. And this is episode 1. So Nick, coming into today, launching a podcast, kind of took it upon ourselves to maybe try to think of something in the last week that reminded us of why we started the Gnar. And I actually had a funny one that's related to the Gnar and how much I love this company and what we wanted to start, in that, like, I got totally put in my place by an employee in the last week, and it was awesome. It got me so excited. So we have this AI working group. Obviously, Nick, you know about that. And we use that working group to keep pushing the boundaries of our agentic development practice. But I'm tangentially involved. Nick runs this group, and I tend to jump in with a lot of opinions. There's somebody on our team who's leading this initiative, has a quarterly goal around this. And I was coming in, firing off with all my ideas, and he just kind of looked at me and just told me to back off. I've got this. And it immediately hit me like, yeah, you do. You're good. You don't need me for this at all. But it got me so pumped, because it just shows how great our team is, like confident, capable. That's our core differentiator. That makes us different. That's like the code production and all that is table stakes. And anyway, that was a full circle moment for me, because I've always loved being on teams and everything. And to have somebody just be like, dude, back off, we're good to go here, just really made my day in a weird way.
Nice. Yeah. Enjoying those sessions that we have. We've got a good team on board there, and just learning from everything they're experiencing working on client projects, and really cool. Like, we're not just sitting around and ivory towering it, but it's based on things that worked and haven't worked, and building a plan around it. Probably a good segue into what I'm thinking about on this topic is really around the autonomy we have to pursue, whether it's offerings or product ideas, just based on intuition, data, our own experiences. And I just got out of a meeting 5 minutes ago on our AI Fluency Program that we've been launching. There's a clear need in the industry as a whole, because it's the Wild West. That's all everyone hears about, but there still needs to be some structure and definition in the learnings. We have a spectrum of usage across our team. I think we're very adept at it, but not necessarily in a uniform way. So being able to take a step back and let's build a curriculum around it. And it came out of that working group that you just mentioned, that we're able to utilize the team's experience, build a curriculum that we believe in, and then enroll our own folks in that is really exciting, and just being involved at it. But at the same time, taking a step back. I'm not an instructor, and we have folks on the team that literally have a background in that. It has been really cool. And just talking to people about that, like I said, I just got out of a call. They're really excited about it, and a lot to come from that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely keep me far away from that group before I come in and ruin it with all my ideas. But one thing I know I can't help out is on the naming side. That's always been my weakness. I don't know. Do you guys land on a name for it?
like 200 message Slack thread that went full circle to I think the original name that we came up with, Gnar Immerse.
Nice. Yeah, it's the hardest part of all of this is the naming, but I like Immerse. It's a good one. Awesome. All right, so we're going to move into our first segment and talk about news of the week. We've got 2 stories loaded up. First is Claude Code just became the #1 AI coding tool, overtaking GitHub Copilot. A major developer survey from the Pragmatic Engineer confirmed what a lot of teams have been feeling. Claude Code, which launched less than a year ago, is now the most used AI coding tool among professional engineers. Among engineers at smaller companies, 75% say it's their primary tool. GitHub Copilot, which had years of a head start, has been overtaken. The same survey found that 55% of engineers are now regularly using AI agents, not just autocomplete. This is a fundamental shift in how software actually gets built day by day. That's our first story. I have an immediate reaction to this, but Nick, want to hear from you first because you're more in the weeds on this stuff than I am. What's your reaction to this story? And what does this mean for a CEO who's hiring a development partner right now?
My initial reaction is I'm glad to hear this because I just put, I think, $15,000 worth of Claude Code licenses on our Amex. So we are firmly aligned with Claude Code being the best tool available right now for developers. I'm going to be tempered. I'm surprised it's overtaking GitHub Copilot. I would have thought Cursor or another more sophisticated agentic tool than Copilot. I'll leave it at that. Needless to say, we're all in on Claude. No shade on Cursor, but it just speaks to a broader swath of our team because it's not just Claude Code, which I really like in the direction they're headed in, but Claude Desktop and the capabilities that it provides with integrations and ease of use for other folks on the team, whether it's sales, HR, full-on integration. I just think of it as an ecosystem play, and then we get the added bonus of having the best agentic coding tool available right now.
Yeah, you touched on it. My WTF moment with this headline is not the Claude Code part, but the GitHub Copilot part. Like, I'm amazed that GitHub Copilot was the most used agentic development tool. I haven't thought about Copilot in over a year outside of PR reviews. And like, to me, it's if your development team is still talking about Copilot, they're multiple generations behind. It's, yes, you can check the box that you use AI, but you're not far along. And that was super surprising to me and a few steps in the past in my mind. So it was surprising, almost as surprising as our Claude Code bill.
Yeah, we were just talking about that on Slack earlier this week about how we have historically used Copilot to do PR reviews. And then we set up Claude Code and it was just ripping on Copilot's PR reviews and they were duking it out. And needless to say, we're better. But for me, for us, this is a nail in the coffin because I think they wanted another $30-$50 to use Copilot and no need anymore because we can just have Claude agents do our PR reviews.
Nice. That reminds me of, we had that like fun exercise where we put the agents against each other for how they would characterize the other LLMs as characters in The Office, where it was like Grok, GPT, Claude, maybe Copilot was in there, I forget. But everybody was throwing everyone else under the bus and saying everyone wanted to be Jim Halpert. And I think it was actually Claude was the only one that didn't put themselves as Jim Halpert. And that's when I was like, you're my guy, Claude. Hey, it's Mike. Before we continue, thank you for being here. Into Thenar exists for one reason: to cut through the noise around custom software development and give you something actually useful. We want to build a community around that. So if something in this episode hit, or if there's a topic you want us to go deeper on, leave a comment. It genuinely shapes what we'll make next. Also, if AI is on your roadmap and you're not sure if your team's set up for it, we made something for you. It's a free 2-minute assessment over at Gnar.com that tells you exactly where you stand. Link is in the show notes. All right, back to the conversation. All right, moving right along, we got our second story of the day. MCP hit 97 million installs. The agent protocol wars are over. The Model Context Protocol, the standard that lets AI agents connect to external tools and data sources, crossed 97 million installs in March. Every major AI provider now ships MCP-compatible tooling. Adobe, Salesforce, SAP, and Atlassian, all of them announced MCP integrations at NVIDIA's GTC conferences this month. The standard has won. Again, Nick, I'll go to you. From a practical standpoint, for a B2B company, what does this actually mean, being able to connect to all these external systems? What gets better and what gets dangerous here?
I think it's good that there's a standard defined for all of this. I wouldn't say my take's contrarian, but I also don't think that MCP is this magic wand that just AIs all of the things. Like in many cases, an API negates the need for an MCP and is a cleaner interface. If you have a very direct need to interface a product, just use a very well-defined RESTful API. However, for some of these larger products, like particularly enterprise SaaS, where some element of discovery is needed, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad that the larger application suites have that. But at the same time, I don't think this is a green light for everyone to just default to MCP. I was literally working on a feature recently and even conversing with the agent. And the agent also advised me, said, no, that's overkill. It's actually a layer of indirection. So not trying to go off on a tangent here, because I think it's a good thing, but when we were reviewing this, it made me think like it's not the magic bullet for everything that we need. I think that's part of the discussion. Do you actually need one? And having an understanding of when they fit in. I almost view it as like when GraphQL first came out, like everyone was just throwing GraphQL on all of the things, and it really complicated a lot of simple apps. You ain't gonna need it. Just use an API. And I think it's different, but it's a similar flavor of that. It's a tool, and when used in the right scenario, absolutely makes sense, but it doesn't necessarily need to be the default for everything.
Yeah, I like that analogy with GraphQL. I think that's spot on. And I think that's going to be the challenge in this podcast, is we think very similarly about this stuff, because it's a little different than your take. But my take here is I would not call the protocol wars over around this. We're still in this period where every week there's the new hotness, and I don't think that's going to stop for a long time. MCP is the best tool right now for some of these connections. Like you mentioned, it's not the only one. CLI tools are gaining a lot of momentum. APIs, like simple APIs, are still great to use within agents. But there's inefficiencies with MCP around like token costs and token volume. And it wouldn't surprise me if MCP is a thing of the past a year from now. It also wouldn't surprise me at all if they solve these problems and it becomes even more of a standard. So I'm waffling right in the middle and not picking a side. But if I were to pick a side, shoot, do I want to pick a side? I think, listen, I'm gonna take the jump. I'm gonna pick a side. I think a year from now, MCP is not as big as it is now. I think there's gonna be a lot of evolution in these external connectors.
Or it's a layer removed where Claude skills or agent skills is the generic version, abstracts this so you don't know, and they just default to using APIs. A whole other tangent, which is probably another topic for another day, is just like the interchange format too, right? Where a lot of these are JSON, and now there's things like Tune, which are optimized for token spend. So I think we're going to see more of that. And that's probably a good topic to address separately, is just token optimization, because it's becoming such a real problem for businesses, your burn on token spend, and that's going to continue to go up. I think I read today where people are predicting that token spend is going to equal engineering spend within the next few years as it becomes more ubiquitous.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier this week. Like, it's only a matter of time before we're spending a full-time salary on tokens. But yeah, great. Enough with the news already. Let's talk about ourselves some more. This is our first podcast, and we get to talk about our company. Let's get back to the beginning so that our dozen of listeners, our parents who are listening, can hear from us exactly why we started Thenar in the first place. Nick, what are your thoughts here? We've obviously talked about this in the past. We've gone through this together since the beginning, but there are maybe some questions we can prod into that we haven't ever really addressed directly between us. Was there a specific moment that made you think we have to do this differently? Or were there things that you were seeing in the industry at the time that you knew were wrong that you wanted to solve for?
I don't think I'd phrase it as I saw things that were necessarily wrong, but at the same time, I definitely saw there being a demand for helping companies establish engineering best practices. And our origins are when there was a lot more startups and a lot more VC money in early stage, and it's a fire drill. And you can still, and this still holds true now, you can still ship quality software fast and follow best practice. And we knew that. We came out of companies that had that in their engineering culture. And that was a big reason I wanted to start Thenar, is that we could work with companies to still establish best practices, do things right, but at the same time, still ship their product, go to market, generate revenue, and not sacrifice and have systems that break and keep them up at night. I mean, that's it in a nutshell anyways.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess, again, for the listeners, Nick and I worked together at a Boston startup before starting Gnar. But I agree with you. We worked at a place that had an amazing culture, talented people, everything was done right. That job for me was kind of my entry into startups and tech. Nick's more experienced than I am and more technical than I am, and I lean on him a lot. But I came in pretty green and just assumed that was the way that it was. But then found out through experience that was not as normal as I had assumed it was. So I think what I found, most teams cut corners thinking that it makes them faster, but we really saw the opposite from our experience, that it's the great people and the great process. That you don't have to cut corners to move fast. You need great people, you need great process, and that's what creates speed in the end. Yeah, to me, it was like, how do we package up this way of working where we can deliver such high quality at high speed and offer that as a service? You think any of that has changed over the years? Like today, do you think that all still holds?
I think that is a great question. And I think, yes, it absolutely still holds true today, but like things are shifting rapidly and there's less of a clear definition around best practice. It's narrowing quickly, but I feel like when we started, there was a corpus of knowledge, like agile was well defined, the tools we were using were well defined, and now it's a little bit of the Wild West, and people are trying to figure out what is the best practice. And I think we're taking what we know and applying those, but it's definitely not as defined as it was when we started.
Yeah, I think the core still holds. And you see this all the time with AI slop these days. If you bad inputs equal bad outputs. And that was core in the olden days when we'd write code by hand and you were thinking about patterns and some of the best practices that you're talking about, and good clean code, well-tested code. And I think that still exists today with agentic development. It's just a very different approach that, yeah, like you said, we're still writing the book as we go.
Yeah, you're training the agents to follow the best practices that we used to practice. And yeah, I think it absolutely holds true. It's just your role as an engineer is shifting, where you're more of a instructor and enforcer of the best practice and an implementer in regards to code quality and things of that nature. Like, on that theme of how best practices have evolved in the 10 years of business, how would you describe what we do today versus, and you don't necessarily have to compare it to what we did 10 years ago, but what do we do today in this new agentic world that we live in? If folks were to quickly ask, hey, what does Thenar do?
I think we are a product consultancy. I would say that's something that's been the case throughout. We've always been a product consultancy. We take an idea from concept through development and maintenance, but now what I think is a really exciting change in the industry is that the thing that actually matters isn't the code. Anyone can produce code now. The agents do that. The humans don't even do the code production. What we do is shape the product. And I think that's always been the case. It's just that there's been more value on code production in the past. And now we can be really squarely in this position. And it helps that we are 100% US based. It helps that we have only senior talent on our team, because we are in a perfect position to help shape these products, and working with founders and executives to take their idea, size it to a budget, turn it into an MVP that's like actually viable. And we've always said this: the client brings the domain expertise, and we bring the product expertise, and we marry those two things together. So I think the changing landscape is benefiting us in a lot of ways, because we've never been the company that says yes to everything. That's how most software projects fail. We say no a lot. We help clients see around corners, and that's always been a part of our positioning. And now it's much more so.
Moving at a faster clip.
Yes, that's been an insane part of it as well.
Mike, you had just mentioned that we are 100% US based. And in the olden times, we had an office in downtown Boston, and we had that very tight collaboration. And now that we're a distributed team, we're still US based. But you touched upon that. What would you say the advantages are for us having retained that philosophy?
Yeah, we have to compete against offshore teams and non-US based teams all the time. And a lot of our work comes from someone getting burned from an offshore team. But I would always say it's not actually an offshore problem, it's a product problem. The technical competency itself really has never been the differentiator. There's great developers all over the world. I think the differentiator is shaping the product and being able to have direct conversations with the people building, have the courage to say no to an executive and a stakeholder, taking a vision and crafting it to, something viable. And I think that just naturally breaks down with distance and team structure. You need to be talking to the people that are building in order to communicate the vision appropriately. You need to have a lot of overlap in your days to be able to check things in real time and keep things moving forward. Um, I think that's been a huge key to our success, at first being mostly based in the Boston area and now being remote, but just having that overlap in the working day, having everyone on our team in direct communication with clients. I think that just helps us to be able to craft the product in ways that you can't from structures and distances.
Yeah, that tracks with my philosophy. I think it really boils down to communication. And even when you say, having been on many a project where you essentially have to say no, there's a level of tact to it, right? Where our team is giving them information and guiding them on informed decisions and saying, here's the options you propose, but here's the data, and my recommendation is doing it this way, and here's why. It's not a, no, we're not going to do this. It's, here's my recommendation based on what I'm hearing and what the vision is for the product. And I think the communication really helps, versus just that async, because I've definitely worked on collaboration with other teams, and you wake up in the morning and you have a bunch of PRs and a bunch of work, and there's just a lot of churn because everything happens asynchronously, where if you could all get in a room together, especially if you're in person or in the same time zones, things happen a lot more smoothly and a lot more quickly.
Yeah, like you're scrambling to get to your desk in the morning because you have 1 hour of overlap with the other team, right? And you need to ask some questions. And then, of course, some part of that conversation misses the time window. And now you got to wait till tomorrow for your hour of overlap. And it's like a mad scramble. And like every one of those conversations is a day delay on getting the product shipped. But also, again, so that is a problem with offshore. I've seen so many rescue projects too from onshore companies where I can look at their app and immediately just be like, you said yes too much. Like you just waved in all of the features, and now this product has way too much going on. Like the UX is bad. Nothing quite works as you expect because they needed to work within a budget to get all your crap in there. So it's definitely not exclusive to offshore, but I think part of it is the communication and part of it is the experience.
Yeah, the level of discipline required for good product management and stewardship.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move into another section talking about what we believe in. Let's get some hot takes here. What's the single biggest lie in the software industry for non-technical leaders?
I wouldn't say there's a single conspiracy or lie here. I'd potentially phrase it differently, but
You're
I
so
think
conflict averse. Let them have it, Nick.
I'll put the gloves on when it's warranted. But in this case, no. But I think one thing that I have seen, and I've even seen it this week, is thinking of software as a CapEx over an OpEx, like a capital expense versus a continually operating, living, breathing thing. Software evolves. It needs to shift with the market or it will die. And the definition of done is not, I spent $50,000, this thing's done, I'm never going to touch it. There's a window in which products are viable and done, but they need to shift with the marketplace. And I think it can be boiled down to exactly what I said. Software is an OpEx and not a CapEx. It's something that your organization operates. And I'd never seen a product that doesn't evolve over time. Name one. And the time horizon might shift. Windows is a good example, but it's always innovating. And I've seen frustration because we've had stakeholders say, I've spent this much money, I'm done. And then 3-6 months down the road, something in the industry changes and it needs to evolve. And there's been a lot of tension there.
What does your crystal ball tell you in terms of what we're going to see in the months and years to come with all the vibe coding and non-technical folks building software product?
I think it speaks to it even more because it's now there's going to be discipline needed to not just say yes to everything because code is so cheap to produce, but the ability to ship features faster is at a level we've never seen before. And you think about a lot of the larger incumbents that might be more hesitant to innovate. This is going to lower the barrier to entry so that they're going to need to operate more quickly and have more features delivered more faster. And they can't just have a fixed capital expense on a piece of software, or they're dead in the water.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And the ease of producing apps now means that, yeah, you have people that don't know how to shape a product, trying to shape product, and just adding tons of complexity. That was actually my answer to this, is that simple is not bad, it's fantastic, and simple is not easy, it's the hardest part. Um, because everybody, or all the mostly the non-technical folks that we work with as stakeholders, they want all the bells and whistles. They want so much complication when they're just starting out. And like, we really focus on simplicity, but sometimes in those conversations, you get a little pushback. It's almost like they feel like simplicity means that you can't handle the complexity. And in reality, like, every project is complex. That's just what's going to happen. But having the discipline to make each piece of the complex system as simple as possible provides the flexibility of the code base to be extended and more easily maintained. But that's the key point I think that you touched on too, is the maintenance piece is just not considered. People don't think about what they need to, like, what they need to, the ongoing cost or the just ongoing needs of a software product. It's not like a house where you just build it and then it exists, even though, maybe bad analogy, houses need a lot of maintenance too. But building is like chapter one. And if you need your software to survive for years, you need to maintain it. And simplicity enables that, the code base to survive. Definitely kind of overlap in terms of how we're thinking about that. I'm curious with you, like, if there's anything in your mind around like what moving fast in software requires. Is there anything that we do on day one that other agencies skip, or anything in our secret sauce or just not so secret sauce that enables speed?
I think our commitment to following best practices, and that's not us being pedantic or not adaptable, but by setting things up properly, it allows us to move fast and not break shit. If we're setting up a greenfield project for agentic development, ensuring that we have CI and CD set up and running test suites, and that will put on guardrails to make sure that as we're shipping software so much faster, it's doing everything from linting to make sure that code's not breaking, to regression tests, and taking all of our knowledge from mistakes made on things that we've broken and codifying that into a process on day one. And that's not to say other folks don't do that, but I think that's an area that we pay close attention to, so that we start a project up correctly, and along the way we just have that confidence that we're able to move fast. And then at the end, we're not scrambling to QA and find all the bugs and regressions that will happen if you don't follow these best practices.
Right. And we borrowed the phrase from the Navy SEALs for this, that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So if it worked for the SEALs, it should work for us. But I think a lot of those best practices that you mentioned, like, that's where the corner cutting comes at other organizations that think they're moving fast. So they'll skip tests or skip PR reviews just to ship the feature, thinking that this is how startups work. This is how you move fast. And then 6 months later, they're spending 80% of their time on bugs and rework. And there was no time saved in the long run. It's almost like you're just borrowing at a terrible interest rate. The other thing that, when I was thinking about this question, the thing that came to mind was recency bias. I've seen this a ton, just to absolutely kill speed, where every feature in the backlog becomes, or when you get pinged on Slack and, hey, we need this feature ASAP, not really considering that at one point every feature in the backlog was the most urgent thing. It's just chase and causes thrashing in the process. But speed is actually having a process and maintaining that process, priorities, and then you can just crank the work. That's another one that comes up in countless projects over the years.
Yeah, and I gave a very engineering centric response here, but one area that we found out that's super important is, especially in agentic development, is front loading requirements, clarity, and context. Because one bad line of context is probably 100 lines of bad code, and just performing all of that due diligence up front and making sure there's clarity around what the product is and what it needs to do, how it needs to operate is so important. So then the robots can go off and build it. And I think that speaks to what you brought up around the backlog, because if things are just being thrown in ad hoc, it means that there wasn't enough time spent up front to define what the product should do and what should be prioritized in that backlog. And we've spent a lot of time honing our process and building out really robust PRDs and the corresponding context documents that go with that can then be fed into the agentic workflow. And it saves so much time. It seems like it's slowing us down initially, but the speed boost on the dev side is orders of magnitude faster as a result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's been interesting as we think about this podcast and what we want to do here, because these are topics that we could talk about for hours, right? We could have a podcast talking about the technical details of all of this and being software developers, get into the nitty gritty. But it feels like there's a bunch of that already existing. Like I'm thinking about, as we're planning the show, who's it for and who's it not for. To me, it's not really for developers. It would be wonderful if developers tune in and like it, but there's so many podcasts for developers out there, YouTube channels, everything in between. To me, I've just been having so many conversations with like friends who are in private equity or are operators at large businesses, and they're all like in scramble mode, trying where the industry's moving and not sure how to get there, or they've been like burned before. So many of our clients have been burned before and trying to trust a new partner. And it just feels like that's a gap. Like there's not many shows out there that will talk about, here are the real challenges. Here's probably what's happened to you in the past. And here's real ways to get out of that. And so that makes me excited. Like I got into software a little later in my career than you did. And before that, while I was learning, it was super intimidating and I was confused all the time. These are the types of conversations that I'm now coaching my friends in. But if someone would just explain this in plain terms, I'd be able to make better decisions. So to me, this is just an effort to bring that forward and just talk in plain terms about complex topics that are top of mind to everybody right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. As much as I love nerding it up and taking a technical deep dive, I think there's so much value in talking about our experience in the trenches and surfacing what does all of this mean, and what is the impact from the business side of things with these tools and what we're doing in the agency space and how it can be applied for folks more on the business side of things.
All right, so we're coming up on time and we're just going to rip through some rapid fire questions. These are going to be things that we're going to be asking some of our guests, and we're going to dog food this by answering them ourselves. Our first one: if you could build any piece of software in the world, no constraints, unlimited budget, what would you build and why? I'll kick us off. At first, I got on my soapbox and I was like, end world hunger, like world peace, something about that. And I was like, that's too big for software and way above my pay grade. I dumbed it down all the way to, I just sold my house and bought a new one. So I want an app where I can take a video of both houses, and it'll design the new home with all of my stuff in it. And anything that doesn't work can go straight on Facebook Marketplace, and anything I need, it'll just give me the options for everything that I need, and just done. What do you got?
That's actually a really strong idea. I know my wife would appreciate that, and there would be a whole lot of my items on Facebook Marketplace. So good idea. I'm just hesitant because I know the impact of it. There's a lot for me on this one. I think one big one for me is just a better communication platform. Right now, we're using Google and Slack and occasionally Teams, and I'd rather fax people than use Teams. And it seems like such a solvable problem, but there's nothing out there that is like really good. We use Slack and Gmail, but there's so many gaps there. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to innovate in this space. And if I had unlimited resources, I'd put my hat in the ring and give it a go.
Nice. All right, ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude?
Claude by a mile.
Yeah, that's an easy one. What's one piece of software that you genuinely cannot run your life or business without?
Probably Slack.
See above.
Yeah, exactly. For better or worse, it keeps the entire team connected in real time. It can be a distraction, but I don't know where we'd be without it being a remote team.
Yep. To me, it's Claude. I just use it every day. I can't operate without it.
That was my other one that I had on there too. But
All right, and the easiest rapid fire question of the day: what's your favorite Starburst flavor? I think we can both agree it's obviously pink.
we know I'm Team Orange. I'm a weirdo. Orange,
Yeah.
red, pink, yellow.
That's just wrong. And this was actually Nick and I's first argument. That's when we started the company. We were buddies, colleagues from the past company, and we just aligned on kind of everything. And then one day somebody had Starburst, and we just got into this conversation. And I guess it's a good problem to have. We got to disagree on something and let it be Starburst flavors, but you're still wrong.
I love it because my family is Team Pink, so I get all of the orange Starburst just given to me, so it works out quite well.
Yeah, because your family, they get it. All right, before we close out, Nick, what's one thing you've seen in your career that made you want to make this show?
So this is very recent, and I will preface it by saying we are guilty of this. But right now, generating content is essentially free. If I go on LinkedIn feed or blog posts, and a lot of it is good content, but there is just so much of it, and it's hard to discern like real conversations and human voices. And admittedly, I wouldn't say I had cold feet, but I've always been a little hesitant on pursuing a podcast, but I think it's going to become more and more important to have like real humans talking and not just AI generated marketing material out there. It's an opportunity for like unfiltered human voices. It's not going to be watered down or vanilla because you asked AI on what's the smoothest or least offensive way to say this. I'm not trying to be offensive, but friction free. But I think having these unscripted conversations are just going to be more and more important to differentiate yourselves and just have good conversation.
Nice. All right, that's episode 1. If you found value in it, come back next episode. And as a small favor to us, please consider telling a friend or sharing it on your socials. We'll be here every other Monday. Leave us a comment and tell us what you want to hear next. What decision's keeping you up at night? What question do you wish someone would just answer plainly? That's why we're here. And if you've been wondering whether your team's actually set up to use AI, we built a free 2-minute AI assessment at ai-assessment.thenar.com. It gives you a straight answer and tells you exactly where to start. Link is in the show notes. See you in the NAR.